Yeah, good morning, students. In the previous class, we had a discussion on different types of iterative statements, that is also known as different types of loop statements. So, for loop, and then while loop, and then do while loop. These are the three different types of looping statements. We discussed and sample programs using those looping statements also. We discussed in this classroom discussion topics. Now, in today's classroom discussion topic, so we are going to see the nested loops. That means we can embed one loop within another loop. So while loop you can embed within a for loop, or two while loops you can embed it, or two for loops we can embed it, one do while loop and then another do while loop you can embed it. So then it is called as a nested loops. So we are going to see how the execution of these nested loops will be there in this particular classroom discussion topic. Now I would like to share my screen. So I hope my screen is visible to you. So the lecture objectives of this particular session will be, it will develop the students' knowledge on looping statements such as nested loop statements. We are going to see that. Now, nested loops refers to a loop that is embedded. Okay, a nested loop refers to a loop that is contained within another loop. So if the following output has to be obtained on the screen, suppose if you want to print 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, and then 4, 4, 4, then the corresponding program will goes like this. That means here how many rows you want to print? You want to print 4 rows you want to print. So for that particular purpose, you need a for loop here. So for a row equal to 1 and row less than or equal to 4 and row plus plus, then how many columns in every row? First, if it is a first row, you are printing one column value. In a second row, you are printing two column values. In third row, you are printing three column values. So that means it based on the number of rows. So now we are taking one more for loop within this for loop. So for column equal to 1, column less than or equal to row, and column plus plus. Then printf percentage d backslash t, which is used for horizontal tab, and we are printing row number. Fine. So then after completion of this inner loop, this is called it as a inner loop, we can call it as, and this is called it as an outer loop, we can call it as. Then printf backslash n, then it will print the new line character. That means after printing this row, cursor will come to the next row. After printing this row, cursor will come to the next row. So this outer loop is for rows iteration, and this inner loop is for column iterations. So this is how we can nest the for loops. One for loop is nested within another for loop. Generally, these nested for loops are used to print these patterns of different numbers, or different patterns. If you want to print that, we can make use of that. So this is one example here of a for, then initialize 1, condition 1, update 1. Then this is a second for loop for initialize 2, condition 2, update 2, and then the code will goes here. So how it will be executed here? First, it will start that initialization 1, and it will test the condition. Is condition 1 is valid? Yes. Then it will enter into this inner loop. That is a second for loop. It will enter into that. So if the condition is false, if condition 1 is false, then you are coming out of this loop and you are coming to this stop. That means you are coming to the next statement after this nested loop. Fine. So if this outer loop condition 1 is true, then we are executing the inner loop. Now inner loop is repeated here. This almost this orange color, this particular box, in this particular box, whatever we have written here. So this will be going to be repeatedly executed. This is what we are calling it as an inner loop coding. Second loop. So second loop initialization will be done, and then second condition will be tested. If it is true, execute the body inside the second for loop, then update the statement, update 2 will be executed, then second condition will be tested. If it is true, then it will be repeated. So this will be looping as long as this condition 2 is true. So once the condition 2 is false, we will come to here, and we will come to update 1 statement. If the condition 2 is false, we will come to this update 1 statement, we will come to that. and then we are checking the condition again. Condition 1 we are checking that. If condition 1 is true, then again we will enter into this loop, inner loop. So that means again it will goes to the initialization. So here in the inner loop, initialization will be repetitively done. For every outer loop iteration, the initialization of this inner loop will be done. Fine. So this is a second for loop, and this um, uh, green color indicates that this is the first for loop. Okay. So this within this green color, you are embedding this orange color basically. Fine. That is the nested for loop. This is one example. So the execution of this nested for loop, if you see that this is the initialization and then condition and decrement operation, and this is the initialization, condition, increment and decrementation, and this is the body of this loop. So these numbers indicates that first it will be done initialization. Then after that it will check this condition, outer loop condition, it will check that. If condition is true, it will enter into this inner loop. So initialization will be carried out, fourth step. Then condition will be checked here. If it is true, then fifth step, body will be executed. After that, sixth step, increment and decrementation, it will comes to this inner loop. And if it is true, again it will come to the condition here. If this condition is true, then it will execute this statements. Okay, so like this it will be, it does. Okay, if the condition is false, that means after seventh, so we will come to the end of this inner loop. Then condition control will comes to this increment and decrement statement of this outer loop. So that is the ninth. So once it is done, then it again it will check the condition. If the condition is true, then it will again enter into this. So this is how the execution of the nested loop is there. For every iteration of this outer loop, the inner loop is repetitively executed. For every iteration of the outer loop, the inner loop is executed n number of times as long as the condition is true. Inner loop condition is true. So this is a syntax here. You are embedding a while loop within another while loop. So this is the outer while loop condition. Then outer while loop statements are there. Then inner while loop condition, inner while statements are there. Then these are the statements, outer loop statement. This belongs to that. So like this is what outer loop and this is what the inner loop body. Fine. So this is what embedding or nesting of the while loops basically. So if you see that here, so in this particular example, one while loop, outer is a outer loop is a while loop and inner loop is a for loop we have taken here. So like this also we can embed it here. So whatever the coding you want to do that in the outer loop you can do here, and whatever the coding you want to do within this inner loop you can do here within this. So now the reflection spot here is that identify the output of the following nested for loop. So here what we are doing, we are reading the n value and then the outer loop is repeated, I is equal to 1 and I is greater than or equal to n. So is n value is 5, if you are given that, is 1 is greater than or equal to 5? No, condition is false, it will not execute this, it will not enter into this loop. So once the outer loop condition is false, the control will come out of this statement. So it will come to this end of this outer loop. So that is the printf backslash n is the end of this outer loop. Sorry. So this is what the end of this outer loop is basically. So now the lecture out objectives are revisited here. So this session will develop the students' knowledge on the nested loop structures like for loop, you can nest, while loops, you can nest, do while loop also we can nest. Okay, one for loop, one while loop, you can nest that. Fine. So these are the summary of this today's session. Following are the three important types of loop statements we discussed that. And nesting of loops means that enclosing one loop statement within another loop statement is called it as a nesting of loops. So any type of loop can be embedded within another loop among these three types of loops. So the lecture outcome is that after completion of this session, students will able to develop the code in C language using nested looping statements. So this is a lecture level practice problem. Now develop a C program to print all the prime numbers in a given range. For example, 5, 20. So in between 5 and 20, inclusive of this both the numbers. So how many prime numbers are there? So this is the starting value and this is the ending value. So what are the different prime numbers are there? You want to print all these prime numbers. So to solve this problem, you need to use the concept of nested loops concept. We have to use that. So any doubts in this particular session? So hope you enjoyed this particular session. So thank you one and all. So thank you, students. So I would like to stop my session.